I tried the Derwent Inktense watercolor paper, and until recently I didn't even know there was one, so I hope it works because it's not cheap. And in this video I'll show you what the paper looks like and the specifics. I'll paint and I'll test it with the new Derwent Inktense set of 100 pencils. Then I'll also share the process and you'll get to learn all my techniques to paint beautiful art with those pencils. I was a bit anxious to try this mysterious paper that Derwent made just for Inktense products, just to see if it's worth it or not. The first thing that struck me when I opened the block was the texture. Because as you can see, it has a little bit of tooth, and I'm not sure why, but I was imagining something smooth for some reason. I like that it's possible to detach each sheet as in any other watercolor paper block. That makes it very convenient. I also like it is 100% cotton. If the paper is as good as the pencils and the paints, then I think it should help me paint something nice easily. And it does say on the cover that it's cold press, hence the texture. It's also 300 grams per square meter, acid free, and it's natural white in color. And everything with this paper is similar to all the other papers that I use with water-soluble and watercolor pencils, so that's a good sign. Although that with water-soluble pencils, I noticed that sometimes hot press does a better job. On the Derwent website, I see that they sell this 20 sheet pad in 3 different sizes, and I got the smallest one, 7 by 10 inches, for $55. Then it's available in 9 by 12 and 12 by 16 inches for $65 and $106 right now. And I think that this is very expensive compared to other watercolor papers that are famous and renowned, like Arches, for instance, even though it's a little bit cheaper on Amazon, but still, so we'll see. Because the claims are that this paper maximizes color vibrancy and that it can bear multiple layers of Derwent Inktense products. And it also says on the cover that it works great with the pencils, the blocks, and the paints. I've been studying water-soluble and watercolor pencils in depth for over a year now on this channel, so I really wanted to try this paper with the Derwent Inktense pencils since they're so much fun. And it's the new box the brand also recently sent me, and I showed that in another video that I'll link at the end of this one. And by the way, except for that one time that they sent this set, I am not sponsored by Derwent at all. I just love the brand. I found this beautiful reference photo. It's so cute, and I know I had to try it out. It inspired me right away. But first, let's run a quick test and warm up here, and I thought it'd be fun to try the Arches watercolor paper against this Inktense watercolor paper. I feel like I'm wasting paper here actually when I do this, but I want to know what I'm getting into before I start painting and show you guys exactly how this compares to a great watercolor paper of the same kind. They're the same weight and both cold press and 100% cotton. On the wet paper first, I noticed that on the Derwent paper, the pigment spreads out way more, but both feel good to paint on. Then on dry paper, I noticed that the tooth on the Derwent paper makes it easier to color, while on Arches, there are more gaps between each stroke because of a more pronounced tooth in the paper. And when I activate the paint, I can get rid of the lines that the pencils make on both. And I think it's more interesting to see the results after drying the paper, so that's what I'm doing here. And you can see they're actually pretty similar, with maybe a bit more vibrancy with Derwent, as claimed on the front cover of the pad. It's very slight though, but keep in mind that Arches is a great paper and that many others would not be giving me this kind of a nice result. Now I can see that this paper seems at least as good as Arches watercolor paper, less paint. And I think the best way to assess new supply is actually try it, because this is where you really see the possibilities and the limits of a medium or a new supply. First, I pick my colors as always, and I try to limit myself to a few. So you can see here that I picked a dark tone with ink black and a light one with antique white. The natural brown pencil will be nice because there is a lot of that kind of color in the photo. This is why also I knew I better have some bright tones to balance all of that, like the apple green and the poppy red colors. and that also is gonna help the art not to look too dull and boring. I like to tape the sheet all around and do a quick sketch with a regular pencil, and then to paint a smooth base layer that looks like watercolors and that is very fast, I just make quick swatches like this on a wet palette with a rough texture, and then it's ready. Wetting the paper feels similar to my Arches watercolor paper, although this one might absorb a bit less water just because it seems to take a bit less long to wet it, but so far so good. As we saw earlier, the paint has no trouble spreading, which could actually be a plus for more of an abstract style of painting with these Inktense pencils. And as always, the paint dries faster than watercolor would. I don't think it's the paper though, because I've seen it with all my water-soluble pencils on Arches paper and other kinds I normally use. I think it has to do more with the pigment and binder that they use inside. For a background, I like something a bit darker, so let's try this and do another layer. Drying is also pretty fast, and I think that paper just holds less water than something like Arches cold press paper, but it's still easy to paint on, and I really didn't feel that rushed, unlike I would with cellulose papers because those dry really fast. So one of the claims on the pad cover is that it's possible to layer easily, and that's actually the case. It's hard to keep the white highlights white on the second layer with a lifting technique, but that would be the same in a traditional watercolor painting with traditional watercolor paper. Past the first layer, if you want to enhance light tones, it will just be a lot more difficult. The moment to do it always is the base layer, and then try not to get darker tones to cover up all these bright ones, although it's always difficult when you add more paint. And that's actually what's happening to me here, and that's why I need to try and improve this, and I'm going for a third layer. And the paper takes this new layer really well. So far, I find that the experience is really similar to painting on Arches, whether it is with Inktense pencils or watercolor. I can even still lift color a little, even though one of the facts about Inktense pencils is that it's not possible to lift the color once dry, and this is my third layer. And for me, that aspect was never true. Everybody talks about this when they talk about Inktense pencils, but I found that I can always lift them to some extent, even after drying a layer. And besides that, I see how I could use this paper for all my watercolor pencils and even watercolor. If you'd like me to try something else on this paper, please let me know in the comments. I also shared the entire process for this painting on my Patreon, so feel free to join me there for a small monthly fee to learn how to paint with watercolors, Inktense pencils, and watercolor pencils. Do you remember about the claim that this paper would enhance the pencil's vibrancy? Honestly, I don't find it to be exceptional, but then again, I never use cellulose papers or cheap papers in general. I always go for such high quality watercolor papers because that's so important in watercolor painting. So I think it depends what you compare this Derwent Inktense paper to. Now I have a blurry background I'm happy with. Let's try and color directly with the pencils to take care of the elephants. And I really like how it feels to color with the pencils because even on 3 layers of paint, it's still very easy. So that's a huge plus for this paper. And you can see that I've blocked in all the colors in the elephants, and I even layered my green and red colors in places, and they're looking good. And when I activate that with water, it feels nice and the outcome is satisfying, just what I'm used to. There is a little bit of the pencil texture still visible in places, but with Inktense pencils in particular, no matter the paper I ever used, there was always a little bit of a residue left underneath, unless I used the swatch technique. Of course, I'm going to push this even further with another layer on dry, and the paper takes it very well. It shows absolutely no sign of weariness from all of these layers, and I'm using this layer here to strengthen the shadows in places and add more color to the elephants so they don't look all brown and gray. Once more, I'm not noticing anything special about the vibrancy. The highlights with the white pencils are incredibly easy to make. Look at how well it shows on top of the dark colors. It's super useful to to draw the little creases in those parts of the elephant where you can see them. At some point I was thinking I might have to use white gouache because I lost some of my highlights early on, but it's not even going to be necessary at all. This is just perfect. And by the way, if you ever purchase Derwent Inktense for yourself or you get them open stock, try and get the white pencil just for this reason. So bottom line here is this Derwent Inktense paper is a great 100% cotton quality, and this is not always the case with all 100% cotton papers. So I am confident that I could use it with any form of watercolor that I want and not just ink-based products, which is great. The experience was very pleasant, but then I think that it's still very expensive, and I know papers like Arches, Sennelier, and Saunders Waterford will do a great job too. So maybe I'll just need to experiment some more on this one to decide if it is that special. I hope you enjoyed this review as well as the art. The baby elephant was so cute I couldn't help myself. I'm very happy with the painting. And I'll see you maybe on Patreon or in this next video here if you want to see how I used my new box of 100 Inktense pencils. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.